Welcome back to the Between Breaths podcast. Jacko here. We've had a little break from the podcast as we've been doing all sorts of things, training, international sports teams and athletes and all that jazz. Anyway, that's just me showing off. No, we've signed a book deal with Bloomsbury. There is a book coming out. You're going to have to wait a while because we've got to write it and then it's got to be all blah, blah, blah. So that actually won't be till 2026. But that is going to coincide with the big one, the biggest of the big things. Those who've been watching intently on social media know I've been training for something big. And I mean, really big. So big, it's going to take 2 years to train for it. So it's not happening until 2026. And the flavor of today's session is one of the stepping stones towards that big thing that I haven't. There's only a couple of people in the world that know this, one of which is my wife. She's not totally okay with it. I think I've still got to convince her, because no doubt she'll be supporting me through it. Still got to semi-convince her that it's okay to do. But, of course, she will be on board. She is the rock that holds us together. But the flavour of today's podcast, or this week's podcast, I say weeks, we haven't done one for a few weeks, but this week's podcast is, and I've always promised that the podcast would be not just trying to do one every week for the sake of doing one every week. I want to keep the quality as high as possible, so we're going to put them out when time allows for us to have high quality guests or high quality podcasts. I don't have a guest today, but I'm hoping the content is going to be high quality. One, because you'll be excited to know what that thing is going to be in 2026, as well as the book coming out. And I can't give it away yet, but what we are going to go through is how I've been training for, and I've got 3 weeks left until the first of the stepping stones this year. The sort of major event is going back to Yr Wyddfa, aka Snowdon. I've also got the Yr Wyddfa marathon in October, hardest marathon in the UK, but that's not going to be as hard as going up and down Snowdon, what is for 24 hours, which I hope will be 8 repetitions. 1 rep is up and down, which is 10 miles and 1,000 meters of elevation. So it's equivalent of doing Mount Everest in one day in terms of the amount of elevation that you do. So, or there or thereabouts. So we're going to cover how have I been, what have I been training, and what is the final 3 weeks going to look like, and hopefully give you some practical tips that you can incorporate into your training as you prepare for, might be preparing for your first ever 5k or 10k or whatever it is that you're doing. Some things in there, and it's not going to be just close your mouth and keep it nasal, like breathe through your nose. We need to be more specific. Okay, so that is the intent of today's podcast, and I hope, my intention is that you go away inspired, and maybe a little bit for some of you. Be different things for different people. Maybe some of you go away inspired. My intention is that you go away hoping to feel like there are some certain things that I've tried to implement in my training that you think, yeah, no, makes sense, and I can see how I could do bits of that within my own training. I'm going to go test it out and see how that works for me. And then for others of you, you're going to respond to the call of the mountains. The mountains are calling us, and we must go. I must go. So 13th, 14th of July, this Snowdon 24hr event, organised by Always Aim High. I did it last year, and there was a number of you came and did a rep with me. I'm asking for 8 reps, so ideally a minimum of 8 people, unless someone wants to do more than one, but you're probably only going to want to do one. 8 people to come and support me, one each. I mean, Mrs. Jacker will do one, so actually we only need 7 people, but we can have it. It's a nice when a few of us go up. If you're super duper duper slow and you're worried about keeping up, don't worry. Come a bit later because maybe the first, second, third, fourth rep are going to be in a reasonable time. But certainly, the fourth will probably be reasonably slow, maybe. But certainly 5, 6, 7, 8, they're probably all going to be fairly slow. But the average has got to be 3 hours, so it's got to be more than a walking pace. If you don't want to come but you want to support, we're doing it for the Head for Change charity, and that is a brain injury charity that I'm supporting. I supported last year, and they help people like myself that had I retired from professional rugby due to a brain injury back in 2013, and this is one of the ways that I want to give. I want to give back. So there'll be a link in the show notes to the Just Giving page where you can donate and support the charity, and my attempt to go up Yr Wyddfa as many times as I can, hopefully 8 in 24 hours. So we'll get into today's podcast. We'll have the little jingly thing, and I will just thank, because it's a very relevant, because one bit of practical advice would be the podcast sponsor, HMN24, produce a number of products that I love, and particularly relevant for the running is the Hydrate. I've got one of the sachets, those on YouTube now, the Hydrate sachets. Something that I've used in all, literally, and this is, as I've always said this about the products I might use, I will be using the Ketone IQ in my, that's from another company that sponsored the podcast, HVMN. I was going to say, because the names are a bit similar, HVMN, and then there's HMN24. Different companies, different products. I will have some of the Ketone IQ in my sachet, but the most important thing probably for me is going to be the Hydrate sachets, because it's going to be hot in July, likely, sweat and cramping. And before I started taking hydration salts like these, I used to always get cramps after around about 20 kilometers into any marathons or ultra marathons. And no word of a lie, since using decent electrolyte salts in my drink, I'll put one whole of these sachets in my water bottle or my Camel pack every single rep that I do. It's one of the nice things about the Snowdon 24hr event is you have base camp, you go up, you go down, you refuel, you redo all your water and everything. So I will redo my Camelback, my water pack for every rep, and I'll put a whole sachet in them, and it just takes away any worry around cramps, because I've had issues with cramps. I've used these, they are no more. So yeah, I use it. I use a little bit in the morning to hydrate first thing, and then use it in all my training as well. Even whether I'm doing resistance work or whether I'm doing running sessions, sometimes just put half a sachet in if it's not going to be a big beastie thing. But definitely for the Snowdon 24 event, we'll be having these. I'll bring plenty for everyone. So if you come and do a rep, you can come and have a hydration drink with us, thanks to HMN24. If you want to get a 10% discount on these products that I'm using from HMN24, use the code JACO10 to get 10% off for all the podcast listeners. So that's enough for that. Let's get into today's podcast. We enter this world taking our first breath, and sadly, we leave this place taking our last. And what I want to do with this podcast is to explore what happens between those breaths. I'm David Jackson, Jacko, and this is the Between Breaths podcast. So, those that are watching on YouTube will see that I've got a flat peaked cap, thanks to Passenger. Dying for them to sponsor me, but they don't. But I love their stuff, so this has been purchased. Shout out to Passenger, please sponsor me. Trying to, you can't take part in an ultra, can you? Like, you look like way more like an ultra runner when you have a flat peaked cap. So tick, got that. I have got aiming to have always now the shortest shorts on the mountain. So those like tiny little shorts, a little cut up the sides, really expose a lot of leg. It raises a few eyebrows, particularly for those behind me when we're going up any steep bits, literally because there have been reports of being able to visibly see arse cheek. I don't know whether that's true or not, because obviously it's me. I can't see my own arse. Anyway, basically what I'm saying is trying to get all the gear, but no idea, so the phrase goes. But I do have a bit of an idea, because I've been doing, taking part in a number of ultra marathons now over the last couple of years, and this is the first time I'm going back to do the same event, which I was excited about doing this event last year because I knew the route and the mountain well. And you go up and down the same route from Llanberis. So there's not a single bit of that path that I can't visualize, which will be part of my preparation. So knowing exactly where I'm going, I said that quite well, so exactly where I'm going, is a massive positive. So one and straight away practical tip, something I've been told before but not put into place because it's just too logistically difficult when I've done other ultras, is go and walk or go and do recce bits of it and try and recce bits of it in parts so that like you can eventually recce the whole thing before you do it. If you have the luxury of being able to do that mentally, that knowing exactly where you're going is a massive help. So I'm going into it this year feeling better prepared than I ever have because one, I know what to expect because I've done this event before. I did 6 reps last year, and I think I came in like I think I came in the top 10, something like maybe 10th or something. I was pretty happy with it. I was hoping to do a few more. I went back the following weekend to do 3 more to make 9, which is like the officially Everesting it, doing the height of Everest in elevation. And I'm aiming to go from 6 last year to 8 this year. I did ever try to have a little sleep for about an hour and a half last year, and I don't think I actually fell asleep, but laid down in a tent. We're not going to do that this year because by the time you've gone to where your tent is and faffed about and laid down for an hour and a half, you've probably really lost more like 2.5 hours, and you got trying to do a rep in 3 hours. So it's almost like if you just walked fast, you might get a rep in there. So that's where I feel like I could get a 7th rep in rather than 6. And then my 6th rep was particularly painfully slow. I was slower on the way down than I was on the way up. I just didn't have the conditioning for that amount of elevation and mountain work. Because back then, we weren't living in Snowdonia, whereas now, we've moved to the mountains. We live in Snowdonia. I have done for about a year now, and about 11 months actually. So we're coming up to a year when the event is 13th, 14th of July, and having the experience of doing it before, knowing what to expect, knowing the route because it's a very simple route. You go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, the same thing. I feel mentally as prepared as possible, or as I've ever done, let's say, for any other events. It's not always possible for us to do the route, recce the whole route when we're doing things, but if you can go and do at least parts of it, research it maybe on YouTube, like if you're taking part in an event, try and get as much visuals of what it's going to be and look like and get some practice on the same terrain or similar terrain. So yeah, that's one big thing. The other thing, or maybe that's point 1. Point 2 is probably specificity of training. So last year I was doing a lot of work up and down hills in the sort of Huddersfield area where we were living, which was good and was specific, but it was like mainly on hills, on like roads with hills, so the terrain wasn't quite the same underfoot, and you can find some steep hills places, but it's the length of the elevation that is different here. So for example, today it's the 20th of June. It's going to be 3 weeks on Saturday. So I'm just about to do a little bit of work before then tapering down in the final week and a half. And I'll come back to as to why that is in a moment. And I've been out and done a 5k run yesterday, which went up Mortrivan, which is just from the front door. You just go up for 2.5k, and then you come back for 2.5k. But it's literally incline constantly for 2.5k, and then so it's only 5k. But you you feel it. And then today I've done, and I did a resistance training session yesterday as well. And then today I've done a 10K up Mynydd Mawr, aka Elephant Mountain, and that again is a 10K total. So it's literally 5K up, 5K back, and you are going straight up. And that thing's flipping horrible. It's 698 meters high, and I think we starting at about 200 meters elevation where we live. But you're literally just 5K straight up, and there's no, well, there's a little bit of zigzagging to get there, but once you get to the bottom of the foot of the mountain of Mynydd Mawr, it is just straight up. There's no weaving or wiggling or anything breaking that incline up, and it is steep. So there's lots of walking during that, but very good practice. And just the difference in training this year to last year, I'm doing lots of up and down hills like I did last year, but now it's a bit more up and down mountains rather than hills. So the length of the elevation is just significantly different. It was 45 minutes to get to the top of Mynydd Mawr, for example. So 5K in 45 minutes with something like 500 meters of elevation. So I was specific last year with my training, but even more so specific now, and the terrain underfoot. Very like trails, very office. None of it's on the road. It's all trail, and it's all very specific to what we're going to be going on that Llanberis path. So specificity training. Make your training specific to the thing that you're doing. This course is up and down. 1 rep is 10 miles, so it's 5 miles up, 5 miles back, up and down the same path, and it's steep. You've got 1,000 meters of elevation. It's steep up and it's steep down. So the body needs to be able to be strong enough to have the ability to control the eccentric force we get on the downhills, and we need the strength and the conditioning to be able to keep driving on the uphills where we're going to be doing a lot of walking because of just the sheer steepness of it and the duration of the whole thing. And then our whole base capacity to be able to keep going for 24 hours, and then the little bit of the sleep deprivation, all that in there. So I've been working on those things. I've been working on building my base, so working on my base work, being able to do a larger volume of work, but that work now being done literally in mountains. Anytime I go for a run now, because of where we live, it's in the mountains. So I get those elevations, I get the drops, but I am doing specific stuff to go, right, I'm not making this a nice circular round route. We're going straight up Mynydd Mawr and we're coming straight back down. And that is about 3/4 of Yr Wyddfa. So I've done like 3/4 of a rep today, just bagged it in the morning. And then so that's probably the main things, and just what that looks like for you. So whatever you're training for, try to think about specific, it's called the SAID principle in strength and conditioning, specific adaptation to imposed demands, SAID, the SAID principle, specific adaptation to imposed demands. I need to condition my body to be able to do that type of work. And I think the final piece of this that I've been probably doing a lot of work on is conditioning, particularly ankles, calves, Achilles, and knees, quads, hamstrings, to be able to deal with, particularly on it's two separate things, but you've got the uphill and the going up there's lots of steps and stuff on the path as well where you're going up. Obviously we know that that's going to take some like strength to be able to keep driving at a decent pace, even when you're walking, to walk at a decent pace going uphill or up a hard incline. The work the load that's going through just continuously through the calf and the Achilles, particularly when we're up on our toes quite a lot, depending on your sort of uphill walking technique, but you're going to be more likely on your forefoot. A lot of load, a lot of tension going through the calf, the Achilles, through your plantar fascia. So I've been doing a lot of conditioning work in terms of strengthening, lots of single leg calf raises, bent knee, as well as straight knee, to target the different parts of the calf, soleus when the knee is bent, so lower down, and gastroc, the sort of bigger one on top when the knee is straight, to help with that uphill capacity. And that's an area that I'd So as a target for myself, we're going like, yeah, you're lacking a bit of like strength here, because as time goes on, like you're flagging in that area and you're getting sore in that area as well. So that's been an area of strengthening focus and conditioning focus. And I'll talk about the conditioning aspect in a moment. So working out for myself, that was an area of need specific to me, but also specific to the event that we're doing. And then the other one is the downhill. The downhill is fairly punishing. And I remember my 6th rep last year, my last rep was the hardest, obviously. It's obvious to me the hard. But the downhill was the bit that ended me. It was like, that's me, I'm done, I can't do anymore. And the knees obviously take quite a hammering when it's hard on the downhill. So conditioning, particularly around the quads, your VMO, that muscle on the inside of your quad, of your thigh, doing a lot of work to try and strengthen up through there and through anterior tibialis, so the muscle on the front of your shin. And to be fair, with 3 weeks to go, that's probably the one area that I've been a little bit more slack on. So reverse calf raises, Ben Patrick, Knees Over Toes guy, I interviewed him once on previous podcasts with School Calisthenics. He's made like tib raises quite popular. So you can do them just standing bum against the wall and lifting the toes up to target that muscle on the outside of your shin, anterior tibialis, which is going to help a lot with on the downhills. We're hitting the floor, we're impacting, and we've got to decelerate that eccentric force as we're coming downhill. So doing some strengthening work to condition the quads around the knees, and then the anterior tibialis around the front of the shin for the knees and for the ankles and for the calf. And part also of that is going to be some plyometry work, a lot of single leg hops, trying to work on not just those sort of landing mechanics, the rebound that we're trying to facilitate, but also trying to get like some volume in to condition that. Probably doing a much greater number of repetitions in one set than I would have done if I was just doing like plyometrics for speed work. So I'm doing like conditioning of plyometrics, because that was the other thing I'd noticed. We'd done a 2-day ultra from Manchester to Sheffield, the Peak Divide. That was the second time I'd done. No, we'd done that event before, so that was the second. That's like a fairly more casual affair earlier this year in April. But I'd noticed at the end of day 2, or in day 2, I'd like totally lost that sort of spring in the step and in the Achilles, and that's one that really made me focus on this calf Achilles soleus strength, as well as trying to keep that sort of spring in the step, that plyometric rebound. So that's been the bulk of my strengthening work, really. A lot of the work, again, I even make that strengthening work specific. So I go lunging with weighted vest on, with dumbbell or kettlebell in one hand or both hands, and do lunges. Like the road up from my house is quite a steep hill. We just lunge up and we lunge down. So even the strengthening work, trying to make it specific to sort of that elevation and that decline. And the conditioning bit that you probably come to expect with me, if anyone's been following for a while, is I'm doing a lot of breath holding within that work. So breath holding with the resistance work is creating a hypoxic response as we drop levels of oxygen, and there's been some good research showing, or many studies showing hypoxic training combined with resistance work to increase hypertrophy, so increase muscle development by spiking growth hormone, natural hormone within the body that gets spiked, and that spiking growth hormone from resistance training is increased when it's done under hypoxic conditions. Now, typically in the research, they're creating the hypoxia not by breath holding, but by being in a chamber where they control the oxygen levels, and they drop oxygen from 20.9 down to something like 18% or something like that. So you would be inhaling, breathing in less oxygen and creating a hypoxic effect from that. Whereas we know with breath holding we can get hypoxic fairly easily once we're trained a little bit. The other bit with breath holding is we know there's plenty of studies that have shown there's a trainable effect. Like anything, it's like a skill. You get better at doing it, and as you get better at doing it, your body actually gets better also at how it responds to the hypoxia. So we build up a greater capacity. So that's one angle on it. There's also the sort of improvement in aerobic capacity that we can get from the hypoxia response. That's where we're classic sort of oxygen advantage. Those that followed the work I do with the oxygen advantage as a master instructor mentor will have heard about the simulation of altitude. So we can simulate being at altitude by doing breath hold work, and there is a carryover into like an increase in red blood cell from two mechanisms. I've spoken about this before on other podcasts. So just very, very quickly, the spleen contracting in the short term to release more red blood cells, but that's a short term, it will reabsorb them. And the long term, the kidneys increasing EPO, erythropoietin, which is a natural hormone again within the body, but that stimulates new red blood cell maturation or growth from the bone marrow, which is more of a longer term effect. So there's a few mechanisms or reasons why breath holding would be beneficial. I've been definitely utilizing it a lot with my resistance work, really feeling like I'm benefiting from that. Even the simple aspect that it's quite up-regulating. So if you're feeling a bit flat and you're a bit lethargic with your session, but you want to get a decent bit of work done, you do some breath holds in that session. As soon as you do a few strong breath holds, particularly in the warm-up, like we get an increase in sympathetic activation, so the fight or flight response, and you get a bit wide. It's like having a coffee, and the nervous system fires up, and it's like you're ready to get some decent work done. So it hits a multitude of angles that's beneficial for training, and there's what, 3 or 4. You throw on top of that, you've got the increase in CO2 tolerance, which is going to help us to reduce, or one area I'm going to be using it from running is like to soften down, reduce that like strong urge to breathe when you're starting to get really sort of nasty and lactate as you're going up your steep hills or up your steep mountains. I need to stop calling them hills now. It's flipping mountains. Second biggest mountain in the UK, biggest mountain in England and Wales, Yr Wyddfa, aka Snowdon. So yeah, you can soften that urge to breathe that's being driven by carbon dioxide when I'm in the event, and being able to soften that urge allows us to keep a control of the rate or speed of our breathing, which allows us to then control our exhale. If we can control our exhale, we can control our inhale. If we can control our inhale, we can take a better biomechanical breath, utilizing the diaphragm rib cage correctly to allow for a more efficient inhalation, and that's going to help us with our physical performance and mental performance and recovery and fatigue. So that is definitely a huge benefit to having some breath holding within your training. I've just been doing the majority of my breath holding in my like resistance training, my strength training work. Granted, some of that strength training work has been, I guess one of the things I've not said was like weighted vest, but 10 kilo weighted vest, doing repeated hill sprints with breath holds. And sometimes they'll be done with my sports mask on. A tiny bit of my base aerobic work done on my assault bike, where I'll integrate some breath holds into that, which could be as simple as like a 10-minute session where you do a breath hold, exhale, breath hold every minute, but just at steady state type of low intensity, zone 2 type of stuff. Yeah, that's really covering all the stuff that I'm doing. The one thing I did want to say was the repeated sprints with weight vest on going up the hill. Like, do we need the weight vest on? I'm just trying to get a little bit more strengthening work done, but don't need it. But I know that I've got to go up a mountain that's 5 miles on the way up and 1,000 meters elevation. So if I'm doing let's say a 100-meter hill sprint, like, and I'm doing 6 reps or something, like I'm only doing 600 meters. I'm going to try and do 8 reps of 1,000 meters. So I'm trying to find ways to, in training, add another stimulus. So the weighted vest is a very simple one. It gives me a little bit of strengthening work, which strength is going to be super beneficial, super important towards the latter end of the event, where you're so tired and you're so knackered and depleted. That's the right word, depleted. That you're relying on strength, and you're going to feel weak. So if you can start a bit stronger, you're going to get to a sensation of feeling slightly less weak. That's the plan anyway. But doing the breath holds within that adds a really strong stimulus for increasing lactate. So the hypoxia, when you combine the breath hold, the hypoxia we spoke about before, is going to, when you combine it with like sprint style work, like high intensity stuff with short rest periods, then you're going to be reliant a lot more on the anaerobic side of your energy production systems within the body. So anaerobic glycolysis to create energy, and a byproduct of that is lactate. And you're going to, it's actually the pathway to create energy, but you're going to get an increase in lactate in the muscle, in the blood. And the research that, a lot of the research done by French scientist Xavier Warrons, who's working with the French Olympic athletes ahead of the Olympics in Paris, and it's a lot of the breath holding work that I do with, say, GB Rugby Sevens, Great Britain Sevens, that are preparing now for the Olympics later this. The Olympics start later this month, as well as the professional rugby teams that I work with, and individual players, where we're trying to expose them to higher levels of lactate, because the research and sort of rational thinking would suggest if I can expose myself to higher levels of lactate during training and endure it, and have the breathing tools to be able to manage that strong response, then having that exposure to high levels of lactate gives the body the chance to adapt to that stimulus. And we see within the research we've seen, or Xavier Warrens has seen, and we've read it, increases in lactate tolerance, increase in lactate threshold, and the clearance of lactate, and also interestingly, like drops in oxygen levels in the tissues, but a greater reoxygenation in the recovery periods for athletes that have been doing breath holding within their anaerobic sprint work compared to the athletes that were just breathing normally. So a very potent tool to use, and very simple to do. You simply exhale, hold your breath. Some of the work I do, and some of the work I've used with athletes that I train, this is for like the top athletes that have been doing some work. You don't do this straight away because it's a real strong stressor, is using the breath holds with the repeat sprint work with the sports mask on. I did in my training choose to go up Snowdon with the sports mask on, which wasn't a great idea, but I did do a reasonable time. Did I do like 2 hours 16 minutes or something with the sports mask on, or 2 hours 10 minutes with the sports mask on? Was it 2 hours 5 minutes? There's a video on YouTube. I YouTubed it, obviously, but that was fairly intense. But maybe, to be fair, like fairly intense, but for a very long time. Whereas the breath hold, like repeat sprints, say, which can be done running on the pitch, or it can be done in the gym on a sport bike or assault bike, something like that. It might be something just simple as like 2 sets of 5 every 30 seconds, exhale, breath hold, but with the sports mask on, where your exhaled CO2 in your recovery breathing goes back into your body, and it's not nice, and you've got resistance to fight against as well. It's a pretty strong stimulus, but for just a very short space of time. Set of 5 reps, if you're going every 30 seconds, it's going to take 2.5 minutes, and then you got 2 sets, that's 5 minutes of work. Like, it doesn't last very long. It's very strong, very potent, so very time effective. And there's a lot of S&C coaches that I'm working with, or doing some sort of consultancy work with, teams where the S&C coaches are using that themselves with the teams, with the players, with really great results. And one of the things that got reported back to me was getting quite a lot of like high-end type of work done, but in a really short space of time. So it's not quite so, even though it feels it in the session, it's not quite so taxing on the guys and girls in terms of recovery in between sessions, because they're very, very short, which obviously is beneficial and goes down well. So hopefully there's some things that you can utilize in your own training. So sort of summarizing what I'd said in that last bit, we can do some breath holds, so long as we're not pregnant, so long as we don't have any serious underlying health conditions, and make sure you make it nice and progressive and build up gradually. So it's very simply exhale, hold your breath at the end of a normal exhale. That can be combined into resistance work if you're trying to build up some capacity, and particularly if you want a hypertrophy response, you're trying to increase a bit of muscle mass. For me, I targeted like my calf strength and capacity, as well as like quads really, for this event. So working out where do I need that work done, doing some specific strengthening work for that, and adding my breath holding into those sessions within literally whilst I'm doing those repetitions. And looking at rep ranges at like, I'm doing higher end stuff, so it's like 10 to 20 repetitions, and I might not hold my breath for the whole 10 reps or the whole 20 reps. It might be that I just hold it for the first 8, and then I finish the other reps off whilst trying to control my breathing, obviously through those 2 nostrils. And it's as simple as that. In my high intensity course for breathwork, on the Pro Breathwork website, included in the Pro Breathwork membership, there is all fully, if you want like something fully to follow and protocols to go by, you can check out the program there at probreathwork.com. But it really is it can be pretty simple to get started with it, start to play with it. So them I guess my key takeaways from that, as well as those sort of specific adaptations to imposed demands. So trying to make your training specific to the task at hand, the thing that you are about to go and do. So hopefully you found that helpful. Hopefully you've got some takeaways for that. I'm just going to sort of wrap this up with a call to arms. The call to action is, obviously, please, would love you to donate to the Head for Change charity. There's a Just Giving page. You'll see the links in the show notes for that. But I'm really calling out to you to come to the mountains with me. Some people travelled from far and wide last time. I think maybe we had 6 people come and do. A couple came for, that was on the 4th rep. 2 come up with me. On the 3rd rep, we had 2. Catherine did a rep with me. Someone came, Phil, bless him, came. He didn't have time to run up and down the mountain with me. So he came, met us at base camp, brought a load of snacks, and just said, there you go, there's a bag of food, like, fill your boots, Jacko. He said you needed some snacks, and we do need snacks, and sort of cheered us on, and then had to get off. So it makes a huge difference when you see someone, and yeah, it's always been lovely going up and down the mountain with people and chatting and getting to know and connecting, and it makes a huge difference than trying to do it. Anyone that's done lots of training on your own, it can be hard and it's lonely, and it definitely makes it harder. So I would love to see. Some of you have been messaging on Instagram, and it sounds like you're keen, like we need to cement some of this stuff down. I'm putting together this is when rep 1 is going to start and finish, when rep 2 is going to start and finish, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got a schedule that I'm going to try my best to stick to, but I've got a plan, and I'm going to put people's names next to one so I can give you like an estimated time to try and get to base camp 4, which is in Llanberis, the car park in Llanberis, down by the railway station. So yes, a call to arms. Email me, davidjacksonfitness@gmail.com, or send me a direct message on Instagram, and we will organise that up. Mrs. Jacko will be at base camp, and you will get her contact number, so we'll have a little WhatsApp group so we can make sure that people know where to be, and then we can get this thing rolling. If you are coming, bring snacks. And as you just heard from Phil as an example, it's okay to come and just bring snacks. You can eat the snacks as well, but I'm definitely going to want to eat some snacks. And You can just eat snacks and just walk a bit of the way and then walk back down, or don't even walk any of it. Or come early and run with us and encourage us and take us drag me all the way to the top. Whatever you want to do, you're not more than welcome. We would love to see you there. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing lots of you. And I'm actually really looking forward to the excitement of like the build up. We're only just over 3 weeks away, and when people start messaging, or we're having this exchange, right? Okay, you're going to do rep through, and they like, okay, right, we're going to meet you there at that time. Like, let's get that going. So send us a message on Instagram in the DMs, or drop an email to davidjacksonfitness@gmail.com. Or I think there's an info at Prayer Breathwork. There's also david.jackson@oxygenvantage.com. There's a few different emails that you can grab me on, or just drop into the DMs on Instagram. It's probably the easiest. So I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope this might be the little bit of, I said some people might be inspired to come and do that rep, or it might be a few people have said like they're training for something else, and this is a good little training. Maybe they're doing an ultra later in the year, and it's, oh yeah, I'll come and do one rep of that. Be a good little training run for me. So use it however you wish. You can do more than one rep with me if you want to. I'd just love to see you there. I'd love to have some support. And I also look forward to, as I said at the start, this is the stepping stone towards a bigger thing next year, which I can probably say. We're going to do the Welsh Coastal Path. West coast, the Welsh coast, that's about 250 miles. We're going to try and do a marathon a day for 10 days. But then 2026 is when we're doing the real big thing, which we can't yet announce, but we'll be able to soon once we've lined a few other bits and pieces up. But the reminder that will coincide with the launch of my book, which we signed on my birthday with Bloomsbury. They were like, I was like, Bloomsbury? I'm not that much of a bookworm. They were like, well, have you heard of Harry Potter? And I was like, yes. And they were like, we published that. And I was like, okay, you're a big deal. I better make sure I get my spelling right. So yeah, the book is due to come out in 2026, which feels like a long time away. But I've got to write it. So that's good news. I've done about a quarter, maybe a fifth. About a quarter is written in draft form. So we're getting there. So that's all for this episode. Hope you found it helpful. I hope to see you in Snowdon, or I hope to hear it. If you can't come, I hope to message me about your own, what are you training for? What are you doing? It doesn't even have to be running. It could be anything. And I'd love to hear how you're going to try to use maybe some of the breath holding in your own training. And I'd also love to hear, once you've done a bit, what sort of benefits and results that you've seen and experienced for yourself. So thank you as ever for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed. If you haven't left a review for the podcast on wherever you listen to your podcast, please write a review. It'd be very helpful, just for the reach of the podcast itself. And if you think this will be helpful for someone else that you know that's maybe preparing for their own event or whatever, and you think there's some good advice in here, I'd love you to send it to them. Or if you've got a friend that lives near Snowdon, you're like, oh yeah, they'd probably go and do a rep for you. Send them this and say, Jack, I need you to come and do a rep. And let's connect. Let's hook those up. And I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time. This is the 20th of June as I record it. When I manage to get it edited up and out, it might only be 2 weeks or 1 week away from the big thing, the big one, 13th, 14th of July. Snowdon 24hr. We'll see you there. You've been breathing. I've been Jacko. Until next time, keep it nasal.